Are these the transfers from the overseas account?
Yes, and this folder details exactly where the funds were redirected.
My name is Grant Harris, and 3 months ago I thought I had it all figured out. 39 years old, decent job as a risk analyst, nice house in Maple Grove subdivision, and a wife who still turned heads when we walked into restaurants. Turns out I was analyzing the wrong risks. Grant, we need to talk. Erin's voice carried that particular tone I'd learned to recognize over our 12 years of marriage. The same tone she used when discussing overdue credit card bills or her mother's upcoming visit. I looked up from my laptop where I'd been reviewing insurance claims for Morrison & Associates. The dining room table was covered with my work papers, coffee-stained reports, and my old calculator that refused to quit despite its cracked display. Erin stood in the doorway wearing her Navy business suit, the one that made her look like she could run a Fortune 500 company instead of managing human resources for a mid-sized accounting firm. Sure, what's on your mind? I saved my document and closed the laptop. She walked to the opposite end of our mahogany dining table, the one we'd bought during happier times when we actually hosted dinner parties. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor with measured precision. Everything about Erin was measured, calculated, perfect. I've been thinking about our marriage, she began, placing her hands flat on the table. Her wedding ring caught the light from the chandelier overhead. About what we've become. I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. Erin had always been beautiful in that classic way that made other men envious of me at company picnics. Auburn hair, green eyes, the kind of smile that could sell insurance to a millionaire. But something in her expression tonight felt different. Colder. What we've become? I repeated. And what exactly have we become? Strangers living in the same house? She sat down, crossing her legs. When's the last time we had a real conversation? When's the last time we did anything together besides watch television and go to bed? She wasn't wrong. Our conversations lately consisted of logistics. Who would pick up groceries? Whose turn it was to call the plumber about the kitchen sink? Whether we needed to contribute more to our retirement accounts. The kind of mundane exchanges that keep households running but slowly drain the life out of a marriage. I suppose we have fallen into a routine, I admitted. But that's what happens after 12 years. The excitement settles into something more comfortable. Comfortable? Erin repeated the word like it tasted bitter. Is that what you call this? I gestured around our dining room with its expensive furniture and carefully chosen artwork. We have a good life, Erin. A stable life. Not everyone gets that. Stable. Another word that seemed to offend her. Grant, I'm 37 years old. I don't want stable. I want to feel alive again. Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. In my line of work, I'd learned to recognize warning signs, the subtle indicators that suggested bigger problems lurking beneath the surface. The way she emphasized certain words, the distance she maintained even while sitting at the same table, it all pointed to something I wasn't ready to acknowledge. What are you saying exactly? Erin took a deep breath, the kind people take before jumping off cliffs or quitting jobs they hate. I'm saying I've found someone who makes me feel alive again. The words hung in the air between us like smoke from a house fire. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline or the explanation that would make this conversation make sense. Instead, she stared back with the kind of calm confidence I'd seen her use during difficult employee terminations. Someone, I repeated. Tom. Tom Reddick. My best friend since college. The guy who'd been best man at our wedding. The same Tom who came over every Thursday for poker night, who borrowed my tools and never returned them, who knew where we kept the spare key and used it freely. Tom, who was married to Jenny and had 2 kids in middle school. Tom Reddick? I needed to be absolutely certain we were talking about the same person. Yes. My Tom? He's not your Tom, Grant. He's his own person, and he's been mine for the past 6 months. 6 months. I did the math automatically, the way my brain processed insurance claims and risk assessments. 6 months ago was April. April was when Erin started working late more frequently. April was when she joined that new gym across town instead of using our basement equipment. April was when she started buying new underwear and claiming she needed to refresh her wardrobe. 6 months, I said aloud. Yes. And you're telling me this because? Because I'm tired of sneaking around. Because Tom wants to leave Jenny, and I want to leave you. She delivered this information with the same professional tone she used during performance reviews. We've been discussing it for weeks. We want to be together openly. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I felt like I was reviewing a particularly complex insurance fraud case, the kind where the evidence slowly reveals a pattern of deception that's been hiding in plain sight. All those late nights, all those new clothes, all those times Tom had seemed uncomfortable during our poker games. It all made sense now. So, you're asking for a divorce. I'm telling you I want a divorce. She corrected me with emphasis. Tom and I have already started looking at apartments together. We've discussed the timeline. We'd like to make the announcement to our friends by the end of next month. That gives you time to adjust to the idea. Adjust to the idea. Like she was informing me about a change in our cable package instead of the complete destruction of everything I thought I knew about my life. And what about Jenny? What about Tom's kids? Jenny will be fine. She's always been more interested in her book club and volunteer work than in Tom anyway. And the kids are old enough to understand that sometimes adults need to make changes to be happy. The casual way she dismissed the collateral damage of their decision struck me as remarkably cold, even for Erin. Jenny Reddick was a nice woman who'd hosted us for dinner countless times. Tom's kids, Michael and Sarah, called me Uncle Grant and always wanted to hear stories about their father's college days. This seems pretty well planned out, I observed. We're both adults, Grant. We've approached this maturely. Maturely. Right. Nothing says maturity like carrying on a secret relationship with your spouse's best friend for 6 months before bothering to mention it. And if I don't want a divorce? Erin's expression didn't change. Then you'll be married to a woman who's in love with someone else. A woman who's going to keep seeing that someone else regardless of what you want. So, I don't actually have a choice in this. You have choices. You can make this easy, or you can make it difficult. But the outcome is the same either way. I stared at her across the table, this woman I'd shared a bed with for over a decade, whose parents I'd spent countless holidays with, whose dreams and fears I thought I knew better than my own. She might as well have been a stranger. There's nothing you can do about it, Grant, she continued. This is happening whether you like it or not. Tom and I are going to be together. The only question is whether you're going to be reasonable about the divorce proceedings. Nothing I could do about it. Those words echoed in my head as I sat there looking at her perfectly composed face. Erin had always been the type of person who made plans and expected the world to conform to them. She'd planned our wedding down to the color of the napkins. She'd planned our career moves, our house purchase, our investment strategy. Now she'd planned the end of our marriage with the same meticulous attention to detail. I need some time to process this, I said finally. Of course. Take all the time you need, but Grant? She stood up and smoothed her skirt. Don't make this harder than it has to be. We can do this like civilized adults, or we can do it the hard way. I'd prefer civilized. She walked toward the stairs, then paused. Oh, and Tom will still be coming over for poker Thursday. We agreed it would be weird to change our routines until we make the official announcement. I watched her climb the stairs to our bedroom, her heels clicking against each step with the same measured precision she'd used walking to the table. Everything calculated, everything planned, nothing I could do about it. I opened my laptop and stared at the insurance claim I'd been reviewing. A house fire in Riverside. The homeowner claimed electrical failure, but the evidence suggested something more deliberate. Patterns of burn damage that didn't match the supposed cause. Financial records showing recent policy increases. A spouse who'd moved out just weeks before the fire. Sometimes the obvious explanation isn't the right one. Sometimes you have to dig deeper to understand what really happened. And sometimes the person filing the claim isn't the victim they pretend to be. I closed the laptop and looked around our dining room. 12 years of shared meals, shared conversations, shared dreams. 12 years of building something I thought was permanent. Erin was wrong about one thing, though. There was something I could do about it. I just needed to figure out what that something was. Thursday night arrived with the inevitability of a tax audit. I spent the day at Morrison & Associates reviewing claims and trying to focus on other people's disasters instead of my own. My colleague Janet kept asking if I was feeling okay because apparently I looked distracted. I told her I was fighting off a cold, which seemed easier than explaining that my wife was sleeping with my best friend and planning to divorce me. At 6:30, I arranged the poker chips on our kitchen table, the same way I had every Thursday for the past 3 years. Red chips worth $5, blue worth $10, white worth $25. The same routine, the same setup, except now I knew that one of the players had been lying to me for 6 months. Tom arrived at 7 sharp, carrying a 6-pack of beer and wearing that easy smile that had made him popular since our college days at State. He was one of those guys who seemed to glide through life without effort. Successful real estate business, nice family, the kind of natural charisma that made people want to be around him. "Grant, my man." He set the beer on the counter and grabbed 2 bottles, opening them with the bottle opener we kept magnetized to the refrigerator. "Ready to lose some money tonight?" "Always ready," I replied, accepting the beer. "How's business?" "Can't complain. Just closed on that new development out on Riverside. 43 houses, all sold before we broke ground." He settled into his usual chair, the one facing the kitchen window. "Jenny thinks I should slow down. Maybe take a vacation this summer. She wants to visit her sister in Colorado." Jenny, his wife, the woman he was planning to leave so he could be with mine. "Colorado sounds nice," I said. "Erin and I haven't taken a real vacation in 2 years." "Yeah, she mentioned that." Tom's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "You should definitely plan something. Get away from the routine, you know." The casual way he referenced talking to my wife about our vacation habits struck me as remarkably bold. I wondered what else they'd discussed about our marriage during their 6 months of adultery. Speaking of Erin, where is she tonight? Working late again? Some project deadline? I watched his face carefully. "She's been putting in a lot of extra hours lately." "Dedicated woman," Tom said, taking a long drink of his beer. "That's admirable." Dedicated, right. We played poker for 2 hours, the same way we had every Thursday for 3 years. Tom won most of the hands, the same way he usually did. He was a good poker player, comfortable with calculated risks and skilled at reading other people's tells. Apparently those skills transferred to other areas of his life. "You seem quiet tonight," he observed around 10 o'clock, collecting his winnings. "Everything okay?" "Just work stuff. Big case I'm reviewing." "Insurance fraud?" "Something like that." I finished my 3rd beer and started gathering the chips. Complex situation. Lots of moving pieces. Those are the interesting ones, though, right? The cases where you have to dig deep to figure out what really happened. I looked at him across the table. This man I'd considered my closest friend for nearly 20 years. We'd been roommates in college, each other's best men, godfather to each other's major life decisions. I'd trusted him with everything. "Yeah," I said. "The interesting ones are definitely worth the extra effort." After Tom left, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the empty beer bottles and trying to process the surreal experience of playing poker with my wife's lover. He'd seemed completely comfortable, completely normal. No guilt, no awkwardness, no sign that he was betraying our friendship or planning to destroy my marriage. I went upstairs to find Erin already in bed, reading a novel I didn't recognize. "How was poker?" she asked without looking up from her book. "Fine. Tom won, as usual. He's always been lucky." Lucky. That was one way to describe it. I brushed my teeth and got into bed beside her, maintaining the careful distance that had become our normal sleeping arrangement over the past few months. Another sign I should have recognized earlier. "Erin? When you and Tom make your announcement, what exactly are you planning to tell people?" She closed her book and turned to look at me. "The truth. That we fell in love and decided to be together. And what about the part where you were married to me while you were falling in love with him? We'll handle it appropriately. People will understand. Will they? Grant, these things happen. We're all adults. Our friends will want us to be happy." Our friends. I wondered if she'd given any thought to how this would affect the social circle we'd built together over 12 years. The couples we had dinner with, the neighbors we'd gotten to know, the people from my office who'd been to our house for barbecues and birthday parties. But then again, maybe she had thought about it. Maybe she and Tom had discussed that too during their months of planning. Friday morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. Instead of reviewing insurance claims, I drove to the public library and spent 4 hours researching divorce law in our state. Community property, asset division, alimony calculations. The kind of information I should have known already, but had never needed to learn. What I discovered wasn't encouraging. 12 years of marriage meant Erin was entitled to half of everything we'd accumulated together. The house, the retirement accounts, the investment portfolio we'd built through careful saving and compound interest. She could potentially claim alimony based on the lifestyle we'd maintained during our marriage. Meanwhile, Tom's situation was more complicated. He'd been married to Jenny for 15 years and had 2 children. Child support, custody arrangements, division of his real estate business assets. His divorce was going to be expensive and messy. Unless, of course, Jenny was as understanding and cooperative as Erin seemed to think she'd be. I drove home and spent the afternoon going through our financial records, bank statements, credit card bills, investment account summaries. 12 years of shared financial decisions laid out in neat folders that Erin had organized with her typical attention to detail. What I found was interesting. Starting in April, 6 months ago, Erin had begun making cash withdrawals from our joint checking account. Small amounts, $50 or $100 at a time, but consistent. She'd also started using her individual credit card more frequently for purchases she'd previously charged to our joint card. Restaurants, hotels, clothing stores. The pattern suggested someone preparing for financial independence. Someone who'd been planning this transition longer than she'd admitted. I photographed every relevant document with my phone, uploading the images to a secure cloud storage account I created specifically for this purpose. If Erin wanted to play the long game, I needed to understand exactly what game we were playing. Saturday morning, she announced she was going shopping with her friend Lisa. She left at 10 and didn't return until after 6, carrying bags from stores I knew she couldn't have spent 8 hours visiting. "Productive day?" I asked when she walked through the front door. "Very. Lisa and I had lunch at that new place downtown, then did some browsing." She set her bags on the kitchen counter. "How was your day?" "Quiet. Caught up on some reading." "Good for you. You work too hard." She disappeared upstairs with her purchases, and I heard the shower running 20 minutes later. When she came back down for dinner, she was wearing a new dress I didn't recognize and had styled her hair differently. "You look nice," I said. "Thank you. I thought I'd try something new." Something new. Like a new relationship with my best friend. We ate dinner in relative silence, the same way we had for months. But now I understood why. It's difficult to make conversation with someone when you're keeping secrets that would destroy their world. After dinner, Erin said she needed to run to the office to pick up some files for Monday. She was gone for 3 hours. I spent those 3 hours thinking about risk assessment, about patterns of behavior and predictable outcomes. In my professional life, I was good at spotting inconsistencies and understanding what they meant. I could look at an insurance claim and identify the details that didn't add up, the evidence that pointed to deliberate deception rather than random misfortune. The evidence in my own life was becoming equally clear. Erin returned home at 11:30 with no files and no explanation for why a simple office visit had taken 3 hours. She went straight upstairs and was asleep, or pretending to be, by the time I came to bed. Sunday morning, I made a decision. If my wife and my best friend wanted to play games, I needed to understand the rules they were playing by. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with before I decided how to respond. I needed to gather more evidence. Monday morning, I returned to Morrison & Associates with a new perspective on deception and fraud investigation. My colleague Janet noticed the change immediately. "You look better today," she said, settling into the cubicle next to mine with her usual oversized coffee. "Get over that cold?" "Something like that." I opened my laptop and reviewed the case files waiting for my attention. "Actually, I've been thinking about patterns, how people behave when they're hiding something." "Occupational hazard," Janet laughed. "After 15 years of insurance fraud investigation, I see suspicious behavior everywhere. My husband can't buy groceries without me wondering why he chose that particular store and whether the receipt matches his story." "Do you ever investigate people in your personal life?" Janet paused, her coffee cup halfway to her lips. "That's an oddly specific question, Grant. Everything okay at home?" I'd known Janet for 6 years. She was smart, observant, and had a talent for reading people that made her exceptional at fraud detection. She was also discreet and had no connection to my social circle outside of work. "Hypothetically," I said, "if someone suspected their spouse was being dishonest about something significant, what would be the best way to gather evidence?" "Hypothetically?" Janet set down her coffee and turned to face me directly. "I'd say that depends on what kind of evidence they needed and what they planned to do with it. Hypothetically, let's say divorce proceedings, asset protection, making sure they understood the full scope of the situation before making important decisions." Janet studied my face with the same intensity she used when reviewing suspicious claims. "Hypothetically, I'd recommend starting with financial records. People can lie about their feelings and their intentions, but money tells the truth. Bank statements, credit cards, cash withdrawals, new accounts. What else? Documentation. People think they're being careful, but they leave trails everywhere. Text messages, email accounts, social media activity. Hotel receipts, restaurant charges, unexplained expenses." She paused. "Grant, are we still talking hypothetically?" "For now." "Then hypothetically, I'd also recommend understanding the other parties involved. If there's a third person in this situation, they probably have their own patterns, their own vulnerabilities. Sometimes the best evidence comes from unexpected sources. The other parties involved, Tom and Jenny." I spent my lunch break driving past Tom's real estate office on Maple Street. His company, Reddick Properties, occupied a converted Victorian house with a small parking lot behind the building. Tom's black BMW was parked in his designated spot, along with cars belonging to his 3 employees. I'd been to his office dozens of times over the years, usually to meet him for lunch or to discuss investment opportunities. The layout was familiar. Tom's office in the front with large windows facing the street, his assistant Shelley's desk in the main reception area, 2 other agents sharing the back office space. From my car across the street, I could see Tom through his office window, talking on the phone and gesturing with his free hand. He looked relaxed, confident, successful. No sign of stress about maintaining a double life or planning to leave his wife and children. That evening, I made another decision that would have seemed impossible a week earlier. I called Jenny Reddick. Grant, how nice to hear from you. Jenny's voice carried the warm friendliness I'd always appreciated about her. What's going on? I was wondering if you'd like to have coffee sometime this week, just to catch up. That sounds lovely. Is everything okay? You sound a little stressed? Just work stuff. I could use a friendly conversation with someone outside the office. Of course. How about Wednesday afternoon? I have a break between my volunteer shift at the library and picking up the kids from soccer practice. Wednesday afternoon, I met Jenny at the coffee shop downtown, the same place where Erin claimed to have spent 8 hours shopping with Lisa the previous Saturday. Jenny arrived exactly on time, wearing jeans and a sweater that made her look younger than her 36 years. "This is nice," she said, settling into the chair across from me with her latte. "Tom and I have been so busy lately, we haven't seen you and Erin much outside of poker nights." "Yeah, we've all been caught up in our routines." I stirred sugar into my coffee and tried to figure out how to approach what I needed to know. "How are things with you two? You seem happy." "We are, mostly. Marriage is work, you know, especially with the kids getting older and Tom's business taking so much of his time." She paused. "Actually, he's been working even more hours lately. New development projects, client meetings that run late. Sometimes I feel like I barely see him." Client meetings that run late. I wondered if that's what Tom called his time with Erin. That must be difficult. It is, but I try to be understanding. Tom's worked hard to build his business, and the extra income means we can think about things like college funds for the kids, maybe that vacation house we've talked about. Jenny smiled. "What about you and Erin? You two always seem to have everything figured out." Everything figured out. If only she knew. "We're working through some things," I said carefully. "Marriage is complicated." It really is. Sometimes I wonder if Tom and I have grown apart without realizing it. We used to talk about everything, but lately our conversations are all logistics. Who's picking up Michael from practice? Whether Sarah needs new soccer cleats? When we're supposed to visit my mother? Jenny took a sip of her latte. "Do you ever feel like you and Erin are just roommates going through the motions?" The question hit closer to home than she could have known. "Sometimes," I admitted. "Tom keeps saying we should plan a romantic getaway, just the two of us, reconnect without the kids, and work distractions." Jenny's expression grew thoughtful. "But then something always comes up. Another project, another client emergency, another reason to postpone. Another reason to postpone because Tom was busy planning a different kind of getaway with my wife. Have you talked to him about how you feel?" "I've tried, but he seems distracted lately, like his mind is somewhere else even when we're having dinner or watching television together." Jenny looked out the coffee shop window at the people walking past on the sidewalk. "I keep telling myself it's just a phase, that once his current projects are finished, things will go back to normal." Normal. I wondered if Jenny had any idea how dramatically her definition of normal was about to change. "Jenny, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. If you discovered that Tom was lying to you about something important, something that affected your marriage, what would you do?" She turned back to look at me, her expression growing serious. "That's a heavy question, Grant. Is there something specific you think I should know?" I stared into my coffee cup, weighing my options. I could tell her the truth right now, lay out everything I knew about Tom and Erin's relationship, but that would eliminate any advantage I might have in understanding their plans before they executed them. "Just thinking about trust in general," I said finally. "How well we really know the people closest to us." "I'd want to know the truth," Jenny said without hesitation. "Whatever it was, I'd rather deal with a difficult reality than live in a comfortable lie." A comfortable lie. That's exactly what my marriage had become. We finished our coffee and talked about safer topics: her volunteer work, the kids' school activities, plans for the upcoming holidays. But I kept thinking about what she'd said about Tom seeming distracted, about their conversations becoming purely logistical, about romantic getaways that never happened because he was too busy with other priorities. Jenny was living through the same gradual disconnection I'd experienced with Erin, but she didn't understand the cause. She thought it was work stress and the normal challenges of long-term marriage. She had no idea her husband was planning to abandon their family for a new life with someone else. As we walked to our cars, Jenny touched my arm gently. "Grant, I hope you know you can talk to me if you need to. About whatever's bothering you. We've been friends for a long time." Friends. Yes, we had been friends, and she deserved better than what Tom was planning to do to her. "Thanks, Jenny. I appreciate that. Give my love to Erin." I drove home thinking about comfortable lies and difficult realities, about the difference between what people deserved and what they actually got. Jenny deserved honesty from her husband. She deserved to make informed decisions about her future, instead of having choices made for her by people who decided her feelings didn't matter. But she also deserved to hear the truth from someone who cared about her well-being, not from someone who wanted to use that truth as a weapon in a larger war. I was beginning to understand that this situation was more complex than a simple case of adultery and divorce. There were multiple people involved, multiple relationships that would be destroyed, multiple lives that would be permanently altered by the decisions Tom and Erin had made in secret. The question was whether I wanted to be a passive victim of their choices or an active participant in determining the outcome. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I'd made my decision. Thursday evening, Tom arrived for poker night, carrying the same six-pack of beer and wearing the same confident smile. But this time, I was watching him with different eyes. I noticed how he checked his phone more frequently than usual, how he seemed to be listening for sounds from upstairs where Erin was supposedly working on her laptop. "Jenny sends her regards," I said as we settled at the kitchen table. "I had coffee with her yesterday." Tom's hand paused for just a moment as he reached for the poker chips. "Oh yeah? How's she doing?" "Good. Busy with her volunteer work and the kids' activities." I dealt the first hand, watching his face. "She mentioned you've been working a lot of late nights lately." "Business is booming. Can't complain about that." Tom arranged his cards and made his opening bet. "What did you two talk about?" "Marriage. How relationships change over time. Whether people really know each other as well as they think they do." Tom met my bet and raised it $5. Heavy topics for a coffee date. "She's thoughtful. Always has been." I called his raise. She said something interesting about trust, how she'd rather deal with a difficult truth than live in a comfortable lie. Jenny's always been direct. Tom's voice remained steady, but I noticed he was gripping his cards more tightly. It's one of the things I've always admired about her. Always admired. Past tense. We played 3 hands before Erin appeared in the kitchen doorway, wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wasn't wearing makeup. She looked casual, comfortable, like she'd been relaxing at home all evening. "Hey, Tom," she said, with exactly the right amount of friendly warmth. Not too much, not too little. "How's the game going?" "Your husband's taking my money as usual." "I'm sure you'll recover." Erin moved to the refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of water. "I'm going to finish up some work and head to bed early. You guys don't stay up too late." She kissed my cheek before leaving the kitchen, the same casual gesture she'd made hundreds of times before. But now I noticed how her lips barely touched my skin, how quickly she pulled away, how her attention seemed focused on Tom even while she was addressing me. "She works too hard," Tom observed after she'd gone upstairs. "Yeah, she's been putting in a lot of extra hours lately. Maybe you should plan that vacation we talked about. Get away from the stress." "Maybe." I dealt the next hand. "What about you and Jenny? Any travel plans?" "She keeps talking about visiting her sister in Colorado, but I'm not sure I can get away right now. Too many projects in development. Too many projects. Right. We finished the game around 10:30, with Tom winning slightly more than he usually did. As he gathered his chips and prepared to leave, I made my first deliberate move. "Tom, I need to ask you about something." He looked up from counting his winnings. "Sure, what's up?" "I've been reviewing our investment portfolio, and I'm thinking about making some changes. Moving money around, maybe diversifying into real estate." I paused. "You mentioned that new development on Riverside. Any chance there are still investment opportunities available?" Tom's expression shifted to business mode. "Actually, yes. We're always looking for private investors. The returns have been excellent, and we're planning to break ground on Phase 2 next spring. I'd like to learn more. Maybe we could meet at your office next week. I'd want to see the financial projections, understand the timeline." "Absolutely. How about Tuesday afternoon? I can show you the site plans and walk you through the numbers." "Perfect." I stood up and walked him to the front door. "I appreciate you taking the time." "Are you kidding? I'd love to have you as an investor. We've been friends for 20 years. I'd make sure you got a good deal." 20 years of friendship. I wondered if he'd thought about that when he decided to start sleeping with my wife. After Tom left, I sat at the kitchen table and considered what I'd just set in motion. The meeting at his office would give me access to his business records, his financial situation, his current projects and obligations. Information I might need later, depending on how this situation developed. I also needed to understand Erin's situation more completely. Her job, her relationships with co-workers, her professional reputation. If she was planning to leave me for Tom, she'd need financial independence and social support from people who weren't part of our shared social circle. Friday morning, I called Erin's office and asked to speak with her supervisor, Margaret Walsh. I'd met Margaret several times at company events and holiday parties. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who'd built her career in human resources through competence and attention to detail. "Grant, how nice to hear from you." Margaret's voice carried the professional warmth she used with clients and vendors. "What can I do for you?" "I'm planning a surprise party for Erin's birthday next month, and I wanted to make sure I didn't schedule it during any important work commitments." It was a reasonable lie, the kind of thoughtful gesture a devoted husband might make. "How sweet. Let me check her schedule." I heard computer keys clicking. "She's got that big compliance project wrapping up the week of her birthday, but nothing that couldn't be rearranged if necessary. She's been working so hard on it. Lots of overtime, weekend hours. Very dedicated." Overtime and weekend hours. More evidence of time that wasn't being spent on work. She mentioned the project was demanding. Something about new federal regulations? Exactly. Very complex stuff. Requires a lot of coordination with our legal team and outside consultants. Erin's been meeting with them regularly, sometimes at their offices downtown. Margaret paused. "She's really impressed everyone with her thoroughness. Between you and me, I think she's being considered for a promotion." Meetings with outside consultants downtown. I wondered if Tom knew he was being categorized as a legal consultation. That's wonderful news. She deserves recognition for her hard work. She absolutely does. Should I put you down for the conference room on her birthday? We could do something here at the office if that would help with the surprise. Let me think about it and get back to you. Thanks for checking her schedule. After ending the call, I sat in my car outside the Morrison & Associates building and thought about the conversation. Margaret genuinely believed Erin was working overtime on a compliance project. She had no reason to lie or cover for an employee's personal activities, which meant Erin had been lying to her supervisor as well as to me. She was using work as an excuse for absences while maintaining her professional reputation and keeping her job secure. Smart planning for someone who was preparing to become a single woman again. I drove to the downtown area where Erin claimed to be meeting with legal consultants. The business district was compact, mostly office buildings and upscale restaurants. The kind of place where two people could meet for lunch or drinks without running into anyone from their suburban social circles. I parked across from the Marriott Hotel and walked through the lobby, checking the restaurant and bar areas. Then I visited 3 other hotels within a 4-block radius, familiarizing myself with the layouts and the types of places where discreet meetings might occur. The desk clerk at the Hampton Inn was particularly helpful. "Are you looking for someone specific?" she asked when I inquired about the restaurant hours. My wife mentioned meeting clients here sometimes. I was thinking about surprising her with lunch. "That's so sweet. What's her name? I might have seen her." "Erin Harris. Auburn hair, usually wears business suits, very professional looking." The clerk's face lit up with recognition. "Oh, yes. She's been in several times with that handsome man. They usually sit in the corner booth by the windows. Lovely couple. Lovely couple." "That would be her business partner," I said, with what I hoped was an appropriate smile. "They've been working on a big project together." "Well, they certainly seem to enjoy their work meetings," the clerk said with a knowing smile. I thanked her for the information and walked back to my car, processing what I'd learned. Erin and Tom had been meeting regularly at downtown hotels, presenting themselves as a couple to people who had no reason to question their relationship status. They'd been building a life together in parallel to their marriages, creating shared experiences and memories while their spouses remained unaware. It was more than simple adultery. It was a deliberate construction of an alternative reality they planned to make permanent. That evening, Erin came home at her usual time and asked about my day with the same casual interest she'd shown for months. "Anything exciting happen at work?" she asked while preparing dinner. "The usual insurance claims and risk assessments. Nothing too dramatic." I watched her move around the kitchen with practiced efficiency. "How was your day? Make any progress on that compliance project?" "Some. It's more complicated than we initially thought, but we're working through it." She opened a bottle of wine and poured 2 glasses. "Margaret thinks we should have everything wrapped up by the end of the month." End of the month. The same timeline she'd mentioned for making their announcement about the divorce. "That's good timing. You've been working so hard on it. It'll be worth it when it's finished." Erin handed me a glass of wine and raised hers in a small toast. "Here's to completing difficult projects." Completing difficult projects. I wondered if she was talking about the compliance work or the project of ending our marriage. "Cheers," I said, and took a sip of wine that tasted like ashes in my mouth. That night, after Erin fell asleep beside me, I lay awake thinking about evidence and timing, about the difference between reactive and proactive responses to crisis situations. In my professional life, I investigated fraud after it had already occurred. I analyzed the evidence, documented the deception, and recommended appropriate consequences. But by then, the damage was done. The insurance company had already paid false claims, the victims had already suffered losses, the perpetrators had already benefited from their crimes. This situation was different. I knew about the deception while it was still in progress. I understood the plan before it was fully executed. I had the opportunity to influence the outcome instead of simply documenting the aftermath. The question was what kind of influence I wanted to have, and how far I was willing to go to protect my own interests. Tuesday afternoon, I would visit Tom's office and learn more about his financial situation. I would continue gathering information about their plans and their vulnerabilities. And then, I would decide whether to remain a passive victim of their choices or become an active participant in determining my own future. Tuesday afternoon, I walked into Reddick Properties with the same confidence I used when investigating suspicious insurance claims. Tom's assistant Shelley greeted me with a warm smile and offered coffee while I waited for Tom to finish a phone call. "He'll just be a few minutes," she said, settling back behind her desk. "He's been so busy lately with all these new developments. I can barely keep his schedule straight." "Growing business is a good problem to have," I replied, glancing around the reception area. The walls were covered with photographs of completed projects, awards from the local Chamber of Commerce, and a large map showing current and planned developments throughout the county. "Oh, it definitely is. But between you and me, I think he's taking on too much. Late meetings, weekend work, client dinners that run until all hours." Shelley lowered her voice conspiratorially. "His wife called yesterday looking for him, and I had to tell her he was in another client meeting. Poor woman sounded frustrated." Another client meeting. I wondered how many of Tom's supposed client meetings were actually afternoons with my wife. "The demands of success," I said. "Exactly, and he's been so distracted lately. Yesterday he asked me to reschedule the same appointment 3 times, then forgot he'd asked me to reschedule it at all." Shelley shook her head. "I've worked for him for 5 years, and I've never seen him so scattered." Tom's office door opened, and he emerged with his usual confident smile, extending his hand for a firm handshake. "Grant, thanks for coming in. Ready to learn about some exciting investment opportunities?" His office was exactly as I remembered it. Large desk facing the window, comfortable chairs for client meetings, walls lined with project photographs and financial charts. Tom gestured for me to sit across from his desk while he pulled out a thick folder of documents. "Before we get into the specific numbers, let me give you an overview of what we're doing," he began, spreading out site plans and financial projections. "The Riverside development is our most ambitious project yet. 43 single-family homes, prices ranging from $250,000 to $400,000. We're targeting young professionals and growing families who want suburban convenience with urban amenities." I studied the documents while Tom explained the timeline, construction phases, and projected profit margins. The numbers looked solid, not spectacular, but steady and reliable. The kind of investment that would appeal to someone looking for long-term growth rather than quick returns. "What kind of capital investment are we talking about?" I asked. "Minimum buy-in is $50,000 for a 5% stake in Phase 2. Based on our projections, you're looking at a 20 to 25% return over 18 months. "And the risks?" Tom leaned back in his chair, his expression growing more serious. "The usual construction and market risks, weather delays, material cost increases, changes in local housing demand. But we've built in cushions for most contingencies." "What about your personal financial exposure? How much of your own money is tied up in this project?" "Significant amount. This development represents about 60% of my total business capital." Tom's pride was evident. "I believe in putting my money where my mouth is." 60% of his total business capital. That was a crucial piece of information. "And if something went wrong? If the project failed or faced major delays?" "It would be problematic," Tom admitted. "But I've been in this business for 12 years. I know how to manage risk." Risk management. Interesting choice of words from someone who was risking his marriage, his family, and apparently his business for a relationship with his best friend's wife. We spent another hour reviewing contracts, construction timelines, and market analysis. Tom was thorough and professional, clearly knowledgeable about his business. But I noticed signs of the distraction Shelley had mentioned. He repeated himself several times, lost track of which documents he was showing me, and checked his phone constantly. "This looks very promising," I said finally, gathering the copies of documents he'd prepared for me. "I'd like to take these home and review them with Erin before making a decision." "Of course. Take all the time you need." Tom walked me to the door of his office. "But don't take too long. We're planning to finalize the investor group by the end of next month." End of next month. The same timeline again. "I'll get back to you within 2 weeks," I promised. As I left Reddick Properties, I felt like I'd just completed a successful reconnaissance mission. I now understood Tom's financial situation, his business obligations, and his timeline for major decisions. More importantly, I'd confirmed that he was under significant stress and making mistakes he wouldn't normally make. People under stress make poor decisions. They overlook important details, misread situations, and underestimate potential consequences. In fraud investigation, stressed perpetrators were often the easiest to catch because they got careless. That evening, I spread Tom's investment documents across my dining room table and studied them carefully. The Riverside development was more leveraged than Tom had indicated during our meeting. He'd borrowed heavily against his other properties to finance the project, and several of his loans had variable interest rates that could increase significantly if market conditions changed. If anything went wrong with the Riverside development, construction delays, cost overruns, market downturn, Tom would be in serious financial trouble. He might lose not just the new project, but several of his existing properties as well. Which raised an interesting question. Was Tom planning to leave Jenny because he was in love with Erin, or because he needed a financial fresh start and saw divorce as a way to protect some of his assets from potential business losses? I made copies of all the documents and stored them in my secure cloud account along with the other evidence I'd been gathering. Then I called the county planning office and requested information about pending zoning changes and development permits for the Riverside area. What I learned was fascinating. The county was considering new environmental restrictions that could significantly delay or prevent Tom's Phase 2 development. The public hearing was scheduled for next month, but the preliminary report suggested strong opposition from environmental groups and neighboring property owners. Tom either didn't know about the potential zoning problems, or he was deliberately concealing them from potential investors. Either way, his confident projections were based on assumptions that might not prove accurate. I spent Wednesday morning visiting the Riverside development site and talking to nearby residents. The opposition to Tom's expansion was more organized and better funded than I'd expected. The environmental concerns were legitimate. The proposed Phase 2 would require clearing protected wetlands and could affect the local water supply. That developer keeps saying he has all the necessary permits, one neighbor told me, but the county hasn't approved anything yet. He's been showing up at community meetings acting like it's a done deal, but a lot of us are planning to fight this. Have you talked to the County Planning Commission? Multiple times. They're taking the environmental impact seriously, especially after that mess with the shopping center development last year. The neighbor shook his head. I don't think that Reddit guy understands what he's up against. I drove home with a much clearer picture of Tom's situation. His business was more vulnerable than he'd admitted. His major project faced significant regulatory obstacles, and he was making important personal decisions based on financial assumptions that might not prove correct. Meanwhile, Erin continued her routine of late nights and weekend work sessions. She'd started taking phone calls in private, stepping out to the backyard or going upstairs when her phone rang. She'd also begun receiving text messages that made her smile in ways I hadn't seen in months. Thursday evening, Tom arrived for poker night looking more stressed than I'd seen him since college finals week. He'd lost weight, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he wasn't sleeping well. Rough week? I asked as we settled at the kitchen table. Just business pressures? Nothing I can't handle. Tom dealt the first hand with less than his usual precision. How are you feeling about that investment opportunity? Have you had a chance to review the documents? Still going through them. Erin and I want to make sure we understand all the implications before committing that much money. Smart approach. But like I said, don't wait too long. Other investors are very interested. I wondered if Tom's eagerness to close the investor group had more to do with his need for capital than with overwhelming demand for the opportunity. We played poker for 2 hours, but Tom's concentration was clearly elsewhere. He made several obvious mistakes, betting aggressively on weak hands and folding when he should have stayed in the game. By the end of the evening, he'd lost more money than I'd ever seen him lose. Maybe we should call it early tonight, I suggested when he reached for his wallet to cover another loss. No, I'm fine, just having an off night. Tom dealt another hand with grim determination. Everyone has bad luck sometimes. Bad luck or bad judgment brought on by too much stress and too many complicated decisions. As Tom prepared to leave, I made another strategic move. By the way, I drove out to look at the Riverside site yesterday. Impressive project. Tom's expression brightened slightly. What did you think? Very professional development. I talked to a few of the neighbors while I was there. They seem to have some concerns about the Phase 2 expansion. There's always some opposition to new development. People don't like change. Tom's voice carried a dismissive tone I'd never heard from him before. But we have all the necessary permits and approvals. I'm sure you do. Just thought you should know there seems to be some organized resistance building. Environmental groups, water supply concerns, that sort of thing. Tom's confident expression faltered slightly. Did they mention anything specific? Something about wetlands and a county planning hearing next month. Probably nothing to worry about, but you might want to check with your lawyers. Yeah, I'll look into it. Tom gathered his things with less than his usual composure. Thanks for the heads up. After he left, I sat at the kitchen table thinking about pressure points and strategic advantages. Tom was already under stress from maintaining his double life and managing his risky business ventures. Adding concerns about potential regulatory problems would increase that stress and potentially force him to make hasty decisions. People under pressure reveal their true priorities. If Tom was genuinely in love with Erin and committed to building a life with her, he'd find ways to manage his business problems without compromising their relationship. But if his interest in Erin was partially motivated by financial considerations, a desire to escape his current obligations and start fresh, then additional pressure might cause him to reconsider his choices. I was about to find out which kind of man my best friend really was. Friday morning brought the first crack in Tom and Erin's carefully constructed facade. I was reviewing insurance claims at my office when my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. We need to talk. Coffee shop downtown, 2 p.m. Come alone. Jenny. She'd figured out something was wrong and wanted answers. I arrived at the coffee shop 10 minutes early and chose a table near the back where we could talk privately. Jenny appeared exactly at 2 o'clock, but she looked different than she had during our previous meeting. Her usual warm composure had been replaced by something harder, more focused. Thank you for coming, she said, settling into the chair across from me without ordering coffee. What's going on, Jenny? I think you know. She placed her phone on the table between us. I found some interesting text messages on Tom's phone yesterday. My stomach tightened. What kind of messages? The kind that make it very clear my husband is having an affair with your wife. Jenny's voice remained steady, but her hands were clenched in her lap. The question is whether you already knew about it. I studied her face, trying to read her emotional state. She was angry, but it was controlled anger. The kind that suggested she'd been thinking about this situation and planning her response. How long have you known? I asked. I suspected something was wrong for months. Tom's been distracted, secretive, working late constantly. But I found the actual evidence 3 days ago. Jenny unlocked her phone and scrolled through screenshots. Would you like to see some of the messages between your wife and my husband? That's not necessary. Good, because they're disgusting. Jenny put her phone away. What I want to know is what you're planning to do about it. I'm still figuring that out. Well, figure it out quickly, because I'm not going to sit quietly while they destroy our families. Jenny leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. Tom thinks he can leave me and the kids for your wife, take half our assets, and start a new life without consequences. He's wrong. The intensity in her voice surprised me. I'd always thought of Jenny as gentle, accommodating, the kind of person who avoided confrontation. But betrayal had apparently revealed a different side of her personality. What are you thinking? I'm thinking Tom has made some very poor financial decisions lately, and he's about to make some even worse personal decisions. Jenny pulled a folder from her purse and placed it on the table. I've been married to him for 15 years. I know everything about his business, his debts, his obligations, and I know exactly how to make his life very complicated if he tries to abandon his family. I opened the folder and found copies of loan documents, business contracts, and financial statements. Jenny had been thorough in documenting Tom's financial situation, and her analysis was more detailed than anything I'd gathered during my investigation. He's leveraged everything on that Riverside development, she continued. If that project fails, he loses not just the new investment but our house, his office building, probably his entire business. And you think the project might fail? I know it will. I've been doing my own research about those environmental restrictions you mentioned to him yesterday. Jenny smiled grimly. The County Planning Commission is going to reject his Phase 2 permits next month. The environmental impact study alone will delay the project for at least a year, probably longer. How do you know that? Because I've been talking to the planning commissioners, the environmental groups, and the neighborhood association. I've also been talking to Tom's business partners and his major creditors. Jenny's smile grew wider. Amazing how much information people will share when they think you're a concerned wife trying to understand your husband's business pressures. I stared at her with new respect. Jenny had been conducting her own investigation, gathering intelligence and building a strategy while Tom and Erin thought they were operating in secret. What's your plan? That depends on what you want to accomplish. Do you want to save your marriage, or do you want revenge? I'm not sure the marriage is worth saving at this point. Then we want the same thing. I want Tom to pay for what he's done to our family, and I want your wife to understand that actions have consequences. Jenny leaned back in her chair. The question is whether you're willing to work with me to make that happen. I thought about everything I'd learned over the past 2 weeks. Tom's financial vulnerability, Erin's careful planning, their timeline for making their relationship public. They'd been making decisions about our lives without consulting us, assuming we'd accept whatever outcome they chose to impose. What did you have in mind? Tom's planning to leave me next month, right after he finalizes his investor group for Phase 2. He thinks he can use that money to start fresh with Erin while I'm left dealing with his business debts and the kids' expenses. Jenny opened the folder and pointed to specific documents. But what if his investors learned about the environmental problems before they committed their money? What if his creditors learned that he was planning to abandon his business obligations? What if the County Planning Commission had additional information about the environmental impact of his development? You're talking about destroying his business. I'm talking about making sure he faces the consequences of his choices. Tom wants to abandon his responsibilities. Fine. But he's going to do it without any money and without any way to support your wife in the lifestyle she's expecting. The ruthless calculation in Jenny's voice reminded me that she'd been managing Tom's business finances for years. She understood exactly how to apply pressure where it would cause maximum damage. And Erin? Your wife works in human resources, right? A field that requires trust and professional reputation? Jenny smiled. How do you think her employer would react to learning that she's been lying about her whereabouts, using company time for personal activities, and conducting an affair that could create liability issues if it affects workplace relationships? I thought about my conversation with Margaret Walsh, about Erin's supposed overtime and client meetings, about her plans for promotion and career advancement. You've thought this through carefully. I've had 3 days to think about nothing else. Tom and Erin made their plans in secret, assuming we'd just accept whatever they decided. They were wrong. Jenny gathered the documents and returned them to her folder. The question is whether you're ready to stop being a victim and start being a participant in determining your own future. Stop being a victim. The same conclusion I'd reached during my own investigation. What do you need from me? Access to Erin's communications, information about her work situation, and coordination on timing. If we're going to do this, we need to move simultaneously so they can't warn each other or adjust their plans. I thought about the evidence I'd already gathered, the financial records and photographs stored in my secure cloud account. Combined with Jenny's intelligence about Tom's business situation, We had enough information to create serious problems for both of them. When? Next week, before Tom's planning commission hearing, before he finalizes his investor group, and before they make their announcement about leaving us. Jenny stood up and extended her hand. Partners? I shook her hand, feeling like I was crossing a line I could never uncross. Partners. That evening, Erin came home from another supposed late meeting, looking relaxed and happy. She hummed while preparing dinner, smiled when she caught me watching her, and seemed more animated than she'd been in months. Good day? I asked. Very productive. We're making excellent progress on the compliance project. She opened a bottle of wine and poured 2 glasses. How was your day? Interesting. I had coffee with Jenny Reddick this afternoon. Erin's hand paused for just a moment while reaching for her wine glass. Oh? How's she doing? She seemed stressed, concerned about Tom working so many late hours, worried about their marriage. I watched Erin's face carefully. She asked if I thought Tom might be having problems she didn't know about. What did you tell her? That marriage is complicated, and sometimes people grow apart without realizing it. I took a sip of wine. She said she'd rather know the truth about any problems than live in ignorance. That's very mature of her. Erin's voice remained steady, but I noticed she was gripping her wine glass more tightly. Did she say anything specific about what she's worried about? Just general concerns about Tom seeming distracted and distant. She's thinking about suggesting marriage counseling. That might be helpful for them. Marriage counseling. I wondered if Erin felt any guilt about the problems she was causing in Tom's marriage, or if she'd rationalized their affair as something that was inevitable and therefore not her responsibility. She also mentioned that Tom's been having business pressures, something about permits and regulatory issues with his new development. Erin's expression shifted slightly. Did she give any details? Not really. Just that he's been stressed about some county planning issues. I paused. I got the impression she's more aware of his business situation than Tom realizes. Wives usually are. Yes, I thought. Wives usually are more aware than their husbands realize. The question was what they chose to do with that awareness. After dinner, Erin disappeared upstairs to make phone calls while I cleaned the kitchen and thought about the conversation with Jenny. In less than a week, Tom and Erin's carefully planned future was going to collide with some very unpleasant realities. They'd assumed they could control the narrative, manage the timing, and minimize the consequences of their choices. They'd underestimated the people they were betraying and overestimated their ability to predict how others would respond. In fraud investigation, the perpetrators who got caught were usually the ones who thought they were smarter than everyone else. They made elaborate plans based on the assumption that their victims would remain passive and their schemes would remain undetected. Tom and Erin had made the same mistake. By next Friday, they were going to discover just how wrong they'd been. Monday morning, Jenny and I met at a diner across town to coordinate our final preparations. She arrived carrying a briefcase and wearing the kind of determined expression I'd seen on prosecutors before major trials. Everything's in place, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. I've scheduled meetings with Tom's 3 biggest creditors for Thursday afternoon. They'll be very interested to learn about his plans to liquidate assets and leave town. What about the planning commission hearing? Wednesday morning. I've provided them with additional environmental impact information that Tom's consultant somehow overlooked. Jenny opened her briefcase and showed me a thick folder of documents. The wetlands issue is more serious than anyone realized. His permits are going to be denied, and there might be penalties for the preliminary work he's already done. And his investors? I'm meeting with them Tuesday evening. As his wife, I have every right to discuss my concerns about the project's viability and our family's financial exposure. Jenny's smile was sharp. They'll be withdrawing their commitments by Wednesday morning. I thought about Tom's confident projections and his assurance that the Riverside development was a sure thing. By Wednesday evening, his entire business plan would be in ruins. What about Erin's situation? I've prepared a comprehensive report about her activities for the past 6 months. Documented lies to her supervisor, misuse of company time, potential liability issues from conducting personal relationships during work hours. Jenny handed me a sealed envelope. This gets delivered to her Human Resources Director Thursday morning. Margaret Walsh. I've met her. Then you know she takes professional conduct very seriously. Your wife's promotion prospects are about to disappear, along with her job security. I stared at the envelope containing evidence that would destroy Erin's career. Part of me felt sick about what we were planning to do, but a larger part of me remembered her casual dismissal of my feelings, her arrogant assumption that I would simply accept whatever she decided about our future. There's nothing you can do about it, Grant. She'd been wrong about that. Timeline? I asked. Tuesday through Thursday. By Friday morning, Tom's business will be ruined. Erin's career will be in jeopardy, and their plans for a romantic new life together will be somewhat less appealing. Jenny closed her briefcase. They wanted to make an announcement at the end of the month. Instead, they'll be dealing with financial and professional disasters. And if they try to salvage their marriages instead of going through with the divorce? Too late for that. I've already filed papers based on adultery and financial misconduct. Tom's going to lose the house, half his remaining assets, and face significant alimony and child support obligations. Jenny's expression hardened. He chose to destroy our family. Now he gets to live with the consequences. Tuesday evening, I sat in my home office reviewing insurance claims while Erin worked late on her compliance project. At 8:30, my phone buzzed with a text from Jenny. Investors meeting concluded. All commitments withdrawn. Tom's project is finished. At 9:15, Tom called my cell phone. Grant, I need to talk to you. Can you meet me somewhere? His voice sounded strained, desperate. Jenny's meeting with his investors had clearly not gone well. What's wrong? Business problems. I could use some advice from someone I trust. Someone he trusted. The irony was remarkable. Sure. How about Murphy's bar in 20 minutes? Murphy's was a quiet place where we could talk without being overheard. I arrived first and chose a corner booth, ordering a beer and waiting for Tom to appear. He walked through the door looking like he'd aged 5 years since our poker game Thursday night. His usual confident posture had been replaced by the hunched shoulders of a man carrying too much weight. Thanks for meeting me, he said, sliding into the booth across from me. I didn't know who else to call. What's going on? Tom ordered a whiskey and drank half of it before answering. The Riverside project is falling apart. My investors pulled out today, the county is making noises about permit problems, and my creditors are suddenly asking questions about my debt-to-equity ratios. What kind of permit problems? Environmental impact issues, I was told, were resolved months ago. Apparently there's new information about wetlands and water supply concerns. Tom finished his whiskey and signaled for another. The Planning Commission hearing is tomorrow, and my lawyer thinks we're going to get rejected. That's rough. Can you appeal the decision? Even if I could, it would take months, maybe years, and I don't have that kind of time. Tom's second whiskey arrived, and he started working on it immediately. I'm leveraged up to my neck on this project. If it fails, I lose everything. Everything, including his ability to support Erin in the lifestyle she was expecting. What about your other properties? Can you liquidate some assets to cover the loans? That's what I thought, but apparently there are complications. Jenny's been asking questions, talking to lawyers about asset protection in case the business fails. Tom looked up at me with red eyes. I think she knows about the affair. What makes you think that? She's been acting strange lately, asking detailed questions about my business meetings, wanting to see financial records she's never cared about before. And today she scheduled meetings with my creditors without telling me. Tom's voice dropped to a whisper. Grant, I think I'm in serious trouble. Serious trouble. That was an understatement. Have you talked to Erin about this? Not yet. I was hoping to get the business problem sorted out before. Tom trailed off, apparently realizing he was about to reveal more than he intended. Before what? Tom stared into his whiskey glass for a long moment. Grant, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you months ago. I'm listening. Erin and we've been seeing each other, having an affair. Tom looked up at me with what appeared to be genuine remorse. I know it's wrong. I know it betrays our friendship. But we fell in love, and we've been planning to leave our marriages and start over together. I let the silence stretch between us, watching Tom squirm under the weight of his confession. How long? I asked finally. 6 months, since April. Tom reached across the table as if to touch my arm, then pulled his hand back. I wanted to tell you sooner, but we needed time to figure out how to handle the situation responsibly. Responsibly. Right. And now? Now I don't know what to do. If I lose my business, I won't be able to support myself, let alone start a new life with Erin. She's expecting us to get apartments, plan a future together. But if I can't even pay my own bills... Tom's voice cracked slightly. I don't know how to tell her that everything we planned might be impossible. I took a long drink of my beer and considered my response. Tom was clearly hoping I'd offer some kind of solution, maybe even financial assistance to help him salvage his business and his plans with my wife. That's a difficult situation, I said finally. Grant, I know I have no right to ask for your help after what I've done, but you're the smartest financial analyst I know. If there's a way to save the Riverside project, you'd be able to figure it out. He wanted me to help him save his business so he could afford to steal my wife. The audacity was breathtaking. I'd need to review all your financial records, understand the full scope of your obligations and assets. Of course, anything you need. Tom's expression brightened with desperate hope. I can get you everything tomorrow morning. What about Jenny? If she's asking questions about asset protection, she might not appreciate you sharing financial information with outsiders. Jenny doesn't understand business. She's just worried about security for the kids if something goes wrong. Tom waved his hand dismissively. I can handle Jenny. Handle Jenny? Tom had no idea what he was up against. And Erin? Have you told her about the business problems? Not yet. I was hoping to resolve everything before she had to worry about it. Tom finished his second whiskey. She's been so excited about our plans. I don't want to disappoint her unless I absolutely have to. Don't want to disappoint her. I wondered how disappointed Erin would be when she realized her new life was going to involve supporting a bankrupt former real estate developer instead of being supported by a successful businessman. Let me think about it, I said. This is complicated, and I need time to process everything you've told me. I understand. And Grant? Tom stood up, swaying slightly from the alcohol. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't make up for what I've done, but I want you to know that I never intended for any of this to happen. Never intended for it to happen, just like fraud perpetrators never intended to get caught. I watched Tom leave Murphy's bar, stumbling slightly as he walked to his car. Tomorrow morning, the planning commission would reject his permits. Tomorrow afternoon, his creditors would demand immediate payment on his loans. By tomorrow evening, his business would be effectively finished. And Thursday morning, Erin would discover that her career was in similar jeopardy. I finished my beer and drove home, thinking about intentions and consequences, about the difference between what people planned and what actually happened when their plans collided with reality. Tom and Erin had intended to control their situation, manage the timing, and minimize the damage to everyone involved. They'd intended to transition smoothly from their current marriages to their new relationship without facing serious consequences. Instead, they were about to discover that other people had been making plans too, and our plans were much better than theirs. Wednesday morning, I called in sick to work and drove to the county building to observe the planning commission hearing. The meeting room was packed with environmental activists, neighborhood representatives, and Tom's business associates. Jenny sat in the back row taking notes with the focused attention of someone documenting evidence for future use. Tom arrived 10 minutes before the hearing started, accompanied by his lawyer and a consultant who'd prepared his environmental impact study. He looked like he hadn't slept, and his usually perfect appearance showed signs of strain: wrinkled shirt, unshaven face, nervous energy that made him fidget constantly. The hearing lasted 90 minutes. Tom's presentation was professional but defensive, focusing on economic benefits and job creation while minimizing environmental concerns. The opposition was better prepared, more organized, and had clearly done their homework about wetlands protection and water supply issues. The Planning Commission's questions were pointed and skeptical. They'd obviously received additional information that contradicted Tom's environmental assessments, and they weren't satisfied with his answers about long-term ecological impact. "Mr. Reddick," the commission chair said during the final questioning period, "are you aware that recent soil samples from your proposed Phase 2 site show contamination levels that weren't reflected in your original environmental study?" Tom's consultant whispered frantically in his ear before he answered, "We're prepared to conduct additional testing if the commission feels it's necessary." "The time for additional testing was before you submitted your application, not after we've discovered problems with your initial data." The chair's tone was stern. "This commission takes environmental protection very seriously, especially given the sensitive nature of the wetlands area you're proposing to develop." The vote was unanimous. Permits denied, pending a comprehensive environmental review that could take up to 2 years. Tom's face went white as the commission chair explained the appeals process and the penalties for any construction work that had already been completed without proper permits. I watched Tom gather his papers with shaking hands while his lawyer tried to explain their limited options. Jenny continued taking notes, documenting every detail of her husband's professional humiliation. As people filed out of the meeting room, I approached Tom in the hallway. "Rough morning," I said. He looked up at me with the expression of a man who'd just watched his life collapse in real time. "Grant, I didn't expect to see you here. I wanted to understand the situation before deciding whether I could help with your financial problems." I gestured toward the meeting room. "Looks like the problems are bigger than you indicated last night. This is a setback, but it's not over. We can appeal, maybe modify the project to address their concerns." Tom's voice lacked conviction. "It'll take longer than we planned, but the project is still viable. What about your investors? Your creditors?" Tom's expression grew even more strained. "I'm meeting with them this afternoon. Once I explain the situation, I'm sure we can work out a modified timeline." Modified timeline. Tom still believed he could salvage his business plan through negotiation and charm. He had no idea that his creditors had already been informed about his personal plans to abandon his obligations. "Good luck with that," I said. I spent the afternoon at the public library, researching bankruptcy law and asset protection strategies. If Tom's business collapsed as completely as Jenny predicted, there would be legal and financial consequences that extended beyond his immediate situation. At 4:30, Jenny texted me. "Creditor meetings concluded. Tom's loans are being called. Business assets frozen pending review." At 5:15, Tom called my phone. "Grant, I need to see you. Can you meet me at Murphy's again?" His voice was barely controlled panic. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. This time, Tom was already drinking when I arrived. He'd chosen the same corner booth, but his posture had deteriorated even further. He looked like a man who'd been hit by a truck. "They're calling my loans," he said without preamble. "All of them. My creditors want full payment within 30 days, or they're seizing my assets." What changed their minds? Someone's been talking to them, providing information about my personal situation, suggesting I might be planning to default on my obligations. Tom looked up at me with desperate eyes. "Grant, I think Jenny's trying to destroy me." Why would she do that? Because she knows about Erin. She knows I'm planning to leave, and she's trying to make sure I can't afford to support myself if I go through with it. Tom finished his drink and signaled for another. She's been 3 steps ahead of me this whole time. 3 steps ahead. Jenny had been more than 3 steps ahead. What are your options? I don't have any. Even if I liquidate everything I own, I can't cover all the loans. And with the Riverside permits denied, my biggest asset just became worthless. Tom's new drink arrived, and he started working on it immediately. I'm looking at bankruptcy, Grant. Complete financial ruin. What about Erin? Have you told her what's happening? Not yet. I keep hoping I'll find a solution before I have to explain that our plans are impossible. Tom's voice cracked. She's been so excited about our future together. How do I tell her that instead of the successful businessman she fell in love with, she's getting a bankrupt failure who can't even pay his own bills? The successful businessman she fell in love with. I wondered if Tom understood that Erin's feelings might be more connected to his financial stability than to his personal charm. You'll figure out what to say. Will I? Because right now I'm thinking maybe I should just disappear. Leave town, start over somewhere else with nothing. Tom stared into his whiskey. It might be easier than facing everyone I've disappointed. Disappear and start over. The classic response of someone who'd made a mess of their life and wanted to escape the consequences. What about your kids? Tom's expression crumpled. Michael and Sarah. God, what am I going to tell them? Their father's a failure who destroyed their family for a woman who's going to want nothing to do with him once she understands the situation. Maybe you should focus on salvaging your marriage instead of planning your escape. Too late for that. Jenny's already filed divorce papers, adultery, financial misconduct, abandonment of family responsibilities. Tom laughed bitterly. She's claiming I deliberately mismanaged our assets to hide money from the divorce settlement. The judge froze everything pending a full financial investigation. Everything frozen. Jenny had been thorough in her planning. So, what's your next move? I don't know. Maybe bankruptcy court? Maybe just walking away from everything and starting over with nothing. Tom looked across the table at me. Grant, I know I have no right to ask, but is there any chance you'd consider a loan? Just enough to keep me afloat until I can figure out a longer-term solution? A loan. Tom wanted me to lend him money so he could continue his affair with my wife. How much are we talking about? 50,000. Maybe 75. Just to cover the most pressing debts and give me time to reorganize. Tom's desperation was palpable. I know it's a lot, but you've seen my business records. Once I get through this rough patch, I'll be able to pay you back with interest. I'll need to think about it. Of course, take all the time you need. Tom paused. But Grant, don't take too long. I'm running out of options, and I'm running out of time. I left Murphy's bar thinking about desperation and poor decision-making, about how quickly a person's life could unravel when their carefully constructed plans encountered unexpected resistance. Tom had assumed he could manage his business risks, control his personal situation, and transition smoothly to a new life with minimal consequences. Instead, he was facing complete financial ruin and the loss of everything he'd spent years building. Tomorrow morning, Erin would discover that her situation was equally precarious, and then they'd both understand what it felt like to have important decisions made for them by other people. That evening, Erin came home from work looking more relaxed than she had in weeks. She was humming again, moving through the house with the easy confidence of someone whose plans were proceeding smoothly. Good day? I asked. Excellent day. We're making great progress on the compliance project, and Margaret hinted that there might be some exciting opportunities opening up soon. Erin poured herself a glass of wine and settled onto the couch beside me. How was your day? Feeling better? Much better. I spent some time thinking about our future. Our future? Erin's expression grew cautious. financial planning, investment strategies, that sort of thing, making sure we're prepared for whatever changes might be coming. I took a sip of my beer. Speaking of changes, I ran into Tom today. He seemed stressed about some business problems. Oh? What kind of problems? Permit issues with his development project, investor concerns. He mentioned that Jenny's been asking questions about their finances. I watched Erin's face carefully. He seemed worried that she might know about his personal situation. Erin's wine glass paused halfway to her lips. What personal situation? He didn't go into details, just said he was dealing with some complicated relationship issues that were affecting his business decisions. I'm sure he'll work everything out. Tom's always been good at managing difficult situations. Always been good at managing difficult situations. Tomorrow morning, Erin would discover just how poorly Tom had been managing his most recent difficulties. I hope so. It would be terrible if his problems affected other people who care about him. Erin finished her wine and announced she was going to bed early. I stayed downstairs, thinking about timing and consequences, about the difference between what people expected and what they actually received when their plans collided with reality. In less than 12 hours, Erin would walk into her office expecting another routine day of work and career advancement. Instead, she'd find herself facing professional disaster and the collapse of everything she thought she'd carefully arranged. Tom was already discovering that his business and financial plans had been built on assumptions that proved incorrect. Tomorrow, Erin would learn that her career and personal plans had been equally flawed. By tomorrow evening, both of them would understand that there had been something I could do about their betrayal after all. And I'd done it. Thursday morning, I woke up early and made coffee while Erin got ready for work. She seemed cheerful, even excited, as she prepared for what she expected to be another successful day advancing her career and her secret plans. I might be late tonight, she said, checking her appearance in the hallway mirror. Margaret wants to discuss some new opportunities, and I might grab dinner with a colleague afterward. Dinner with a colleague. I wondered if she planned to tell Tom about her promotion prospects, or if she'd already learned about his business collapse and was preparing to distance herself from his problems. Have a good day, I said. You too. She kissed my cheek with the same casual affection she'd shown for months, then walked out the front door toward what she thought was her carefully planned future. At 9:30, Jenny texted me, "Package delivered to Margaret Walsh. Conversation scheduled for 10 a.m. At 10:45, my phone rang. Erin's name appeared on the caller ID. "Grant, I need to come home. Something's happened at work." Her voice was shaky, uncertain. The confident woman who'd left the house 2 hours earlier had been replaced by someone who sounded lost and frightened. What kind of something? "I can't discuss it over the phone. I'll be home in 20 minutes. She arrived looking like she'd been in a car accident. Her professional composure had completely disappeared, replaced by the kind of shell-shocked expression I'd seen on fraud perpetrators when they realized their schemes had been discovered. "What happened?" I asked, though I already knew. Margaret called me into her office this morning. Someone sent her a detailed report about my activities over the past 6 months. Erin sat down at the kitchen table and put her head in her hands. "They know about the affair, Grant. They know I've been lying about working late, using company time for personal activities. They have documentation, photographs, hotel receipts." What did Margaret say? That the company takes professional conduct very seriously. That my behavior creates liability issues and reflects poorly on the human resources department. Erin looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "I'm suspended pending a full investigation. They're reviewing my employment status and considering termination." "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you?" Because someone had to gather all that evidence and send it to my supervisor. Someone who knew my schedule, my work situation, my personal business. Erin's voice grew harder. "Someone like my husband." I sat down across from her at the kitchen table where she'd first told me about her affair with Tom. The same table where we'd played poker every Thursday, while Tom pretended to be my friend and Erin pretended to be working upstairs. "Did you do this?" she asked. "Did I do what? Did you destroy my career to get revenge for the affair?" I thought about her words from that first conversation. "There's nothing you can do about it, Grant." "I didn't destroy your career, Erin. You did that when you decided to lie to your employer and use company resources to conduct an affair with a married man. Don't give me that sanctimonious bullshit. You gathered evidence and sent it to Margaret because you wanted to hurt me. I wanted to protect myself. There's a difference. Protect yourself from what? From being the passive victim of choices you made without consulting me. From having my future determined by people who decided my feelings didn't matter." I leaned back in my chair. "You told me there was nothing I could do about your affair with Tom. You were wrong." Erin stared at me with an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of rage, fear, and something that might have been respect. "You've been planning this. Just like you've been planning your new life with Tom. Speaking of Tom, have you talked to him lately?" Erin's voice carried a bitter edge. "Because his business problems are worse than he admitted. Much worse." "How much worse?" "Bankruptcy worse. Complete financial ruin worse. The successful real estate developer I thought I was getting involved with turns out to be a leveraged mess who's about to lose everything he owns." Erin laughed harshly. Funny how people aren't always what they seem to be. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. My career is probably finished. My marriage is definitely over. And the man I left you for can't even afford to pay his own bills, let alone support me." Erin stood up and walked to the window overlooking our backyard. "I guess I'm going to have to figure out how to start over with nothing." Start over with nothing. The same thing Tom had mentioned the night before. Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to blow up your life for a 6-month affair. Maybe I should have. Erin turned back to face me. "But it's too late for that now, isn't it?" "Yes, it is." We stared at each other across the kitchen, two people who'd shared 12 years of marriage and were now strangers preparing to become enemies in divorce court. "I underestimated you," Erin said finally. "Yes, you did. I thought you'd just accept whatever I decided and try to move on quietly. I considered it. What changed your mind?" I thought about the question for a moment, trying to identify the exact moment when I decided to stop being a victim and start being a participant in determining my own future. "You did. When you told me there was nothing I could do about your affair, when you assumed I'd just accept whatever outcome you and Tom had planned." I stood up and walked to the front door. "You forgot that I'm very good at investigating fraud and understanding how people deceive themselves and others. And now? Now you get to deal with the consequences of your choices, just like everyone else." I opened the front door and stepped outside, leaving Erin alone in the house we'd shared for 12 years. The house she'd soon lose in our divorce settlement, along with half of everything else we'd accumulated together. My phone buzzed with a text from Jenny. "Tom filed for bankruptcy this morning. Divorce proceedings accelerated. Justice served." Justice served. Maybe. Or maybe just consequences finally catching up with people who'd thought they were smarter than everyone around them. I walked to my car and drove toward the Morrison & Associates office, where I had insurance claims to investigate and fraud cases to resolve. Real work involving other people's deceptions and the evidence they'd left behind. Behind me, Erin was probably calling Tom to discuss their mutual disasters and figure out how to salvage something from the wreckage of their plans. But Tom was dealing with bankruptcy lawyers and creditors, while Erin was facing unemployment and professional disgrace. They'd wanted to make important decisions about other people's lives without consulting anyone or considering the consequences. Instead, they'd discovered that other people could make important decisions too. And our decisions had been much better than theirs. There had been something I could do about it after all, and I'd done it.